England, Canada, Australia, and many other countries are led politically by prime ministers to the Queen. In fact, she is the official head of 123 Commonwealth countries. America, Russia, and other countries, however, have a president and vice president. Usually, corporations have presidents and vice presidents. What does this mean? The US presidents rule from the White House. The Russian presidents also rule from the White House. The Jesuits, a large force behind the Illuminati, have their own White House as well. England is ruled from Whitehall. Jordan Maxwell wrote, "The United States government is being ruled from the White House. The government of England is being ruled from what is called Whitehall. And Whitehall, like our White House, is the symbol of power, because the hall is like the Masonic Hall, the Lodge Hall, the Union Hall." Press Trivedi wrote, "For those who think America controls the roost, it would do well to consider that the Queen of England is still the official head of Commonwealth, 123 countries, and the official monarch of Australia and Canada, along with the United Kingdom. Add to that the fact that all Bush Sr. got for his 2 terms as President of USA is a mere knighthood of the British Empire." The original 13 colonies were actually called companies. Military units are also called companies. We sing patriotic songs like the Star-Spangled Banner, but a banner is a corporate advertisement, not a flag. You surrender with a white flag, no colors. When you get mad, you show your true colors. If you just won independence in a bloody revolution with Britain, would you choose the same 3 colors for your new US flag? Why does every heart ring true for the red, white, and blue? What about the gold-fringed flag used by the military, hung at all courts, schools, and government buildings? It all has to do with the British Maritime Admiralty Law of Flags. David Icke wrote, "This is also known as British Maritime Military Law, and this is why the American flag always has a gold fringe when displayed in the courts of the United States. You find the same in government buildings and federally funded schools. The gold fringe is a legal symbol indicating that the court is sitting under British maritime law and the Uniform Commercial Code. Military and merchant law, not common or constitutional law, under the Admiralty Law of Flags, the flag displayed gives notice of the law under which the ship, in this case the court, is regulated. Anyone entering that ship, court, accepts by doing so that they are submitting to the law indicated by that flag. Judges refuse to replace the flag with one without a fringe when asked by defendants who know the score, because that changes the law under which the court is sitting. If you appear in a court with a gold-fringed flag, your constitutional rights are suspended, and you are being tried under British maritime military merchant law."
You see, there are 2 kinds of law. This is a subject I love. I've been talking about this for years. There are 2 kinds of law on the earth that rule the whole world, but most people don't know that. All over the world, all governments are ruled by what is called civil law. Civil law goes back to a Latin word, civili, which goes back to the word illi. Oh God, I mean, you could go on for hours on this stuff. Civil law, which is called in all countries the law of the land. So you'll say, well, you can't do that because that's against the law of the land. The law of the land is civil law, Roman civil law, the law of the land. But there is a second law which also operates all over the earth identical. It's called UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. That is the law of God in the world of business. I don't care if you're in Japan, in Africa, in China, in Istanbul, Turkey. If you have a company, if you have a corporation, if you are doing business where you buy and sell and make money, you are operating on this earth under something called UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. Because if all countries worked on a different commercial code, then nobody could do business with anybody. You couldn't trust Japan to pay you. Japan couldn't trust America to pay them for the cars because everybody has their own laws. Under the Caesars of Rome, they established under Caesar that all nations in the empire that do business, everybody plays on a level field. If you do business in Africa with China, you pay them. And if Africa does business with American companies, you pay them. You pay. Whatever it is you're doing business, you don't mess around. The most severe law in this world is called UCC, Uniform Commercial Code. It's the Bible of business on the earth. Uniform Commercial Code. Uniform Commercial Code is based directly on Vatican canon law, on the Roman canon law. Consequently, when a ship pulls into port, it pulls in and stops, and it's called in its berth. The ship is now in its berth. Because it is on the law of the high seas, or commercial maritime, UCC commercial law, rules the seas. So when the ship pulls into its berth, the first thing the captain must do is to present a certificate of manifest to the port authorities, which means that the port authorities need to know how much is on this ship that you're bringing into our country and our economy. How many TVs, how many cars, whatever you're bringing, how much are you bringing into our economy. So you have to have a certificate of manifest of what is the value of your ship here. What are you doing? Consequently, when you are born, you come out of your mother's water. Therefore, you must have a birth certificate, a certificate of manifest, because you are a corporation-owned item. You are a human resource.
International Maritime Admiralty Law, the law of the high seas, began in Sumeria, was perfected in Rome, and continues to this day. Jordan Maxwell has explained that the way we trade commerce today is modeled after the Masons, Templar Knights' 1,000-year-old system. Notice how, regardless of whether you send a product by air, water, or land, you ship it. The ship pulls into its berth and ties to the dock. The captain has to provide the port authorities with a certificate of manifest declaring the products he has bought. Through a legal loophole the royals have created, U.S. citizens are considered property of the Queen under British maritime law. Since we are born of our mother's water, from her birth canal, we are thereby a maritime product, a shipped commodity. Our mothers were delivering a product under maritime law, and that's why we are born in a delivery room. That's why the dock signs your birth certificate, your certificate of manifest. You're kept in the maternity ward. Why a ward? No other hospital areas are called wards. Prisons have wards and wardens. The judge sits on the bench for the bank. Banks are on both sides of a river. A river bank directs the flow of the current sea, the currency, the cash flow. The currency is deposited from bank to bank down the river. We're just consumers to advertise to, just human resources to be used up like batteries. And they are the social engineers, molding us useless eaters into wage slavery.
Understanding words is what you really need to start doing. You need to start doing your homework and understanding words. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. They're cutting. They can cause you great trouble. Humans are word-controlled creatures. So we need to establish what words mean. Again, when we talk about law, there's a Roman maximum in law that says, "For he that would be deceived, let him." Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business, that's your problem. So you need to do your homework and find out what the words mean, especially in relation to law and government. because there is a world of occultism that is operating today throughout the world, in which you use certain words, and when those words are used in a court, they don't mean the same thing at all. Understanding law and the words of law, there are two things that this planet has: water and earth, water and land. Consequently, there are two kinds of law: the law of the land and the law of water. You've heard the term law of the land, but in point of fact, that's precisely what this word means, law of the land, because it is the people who live on land. And that is opposed to something else called the law of the high seas, or the law of water. You need to understand the difference. The law of the land is the law of the culture that lives on the land. And so consequently, the law of the land is different in every country. You can do things in America you can't do in Russia. You can do things in Africa you can't do in England. So the law of the land is the law of the culture that lives on that particular land. However, there is a higher law that dominates the entire world. It's called the law of the water, or the law of the high seas. The law of water is referred